Before this game week I was dead set on Salah captain against Fulham at home, but now Haaland against Spurs at home is competing because Spurs have got crucial defensive injuries and the attacking football that they always play leaves gaps at the back. So when you consider that Fulham don't have a strong defence and both players have the home advantage, they're practically neck and neck. The only thing we can do is analyse the data and pick a player based on small margins. Before we move on, I have included Mbeumo against Luton at home on the shortlist. If I was to go differential against Haaland and Salah, it would be him. He is putting up good numbers this season, it's just not quite as good as the other two players and you will see that in a moment, and Luton don't have the best of defences. Starting with the non-penalty stats per 90 minutes for this season, Haaland just about takes the lead ahead of Salah. For those of you that always watch my videos, you'll know that he's slightly more impressive than it appears because Haaland gets 4 points for every goal scored and Salah gets 5. That's factored into the return points calculations, and it's the same for the expected return points calculations as well, but for the expected goals. You might notice there is a slight overperformance on the underlying stats for both players, but that is expected because they are clinical. As for Mbeumo, the opposite can be said. He's been underperforming his underlying stats. They will regress roughly to the expected return points, but I wouldn't expect it to go above that in the long run because he's not the best of finishers. To be fair to him, he is the set-piece specialist in the absence of Tony at Brentford. He's on penalty duties, indirect free kicks, direct free kicks and corners. The other two players are on penalty duties. Salah takes the odd direct free kick occasionally, but not often. He doesn't take in direct free kicks or corners, and Haaland doesn't take any of them. It's Haaland who's got the highest anytime goal scorer odds again this game week. He's 12% ahead of Salah. However, it is Salah and Mbeumo who's got the highest anytime assister odds. They're 7% ahead of Haaland. When you combine both probabilities together, Haaland's got the highest chance of success. He's got a 72% chance of returning, which means that he's only got a 28% chance of blanking. And I do like the fact that his odds are weighted heavily on goals, which of course you get more points for. As always, it is worth considering the weighted odds, where Salah and Mbeumo get 5 points for every goal scored because they're midfielders. Haaland only gets 4 because he's a forward. In that case, I wouldn't say there's much between Haaland and Salah, and we can see that in the points projections. Haaland's got the highest overall with 7.5 both on Fantasy Football Fix and FPL Review. It doesn't rule Salah out of the picture though, he is only a fraction behind. Something to consider is that when I'm recording this video, he hasn't yet featured in the Europa League. That could be factored into the points projections with the uncertainty in the expected minutes, the fact that he could pick up an injury or he could play 90 minutes just a couple of days before this next fixture, and I will discuss that more in detail later in the video. So that could move down the points projections if it's factored in, but of course you've got the possibility that it's not even factored in and the points projections are unaffected. By comparing the opposition's defence, you can see why I've included Mbeumo on the shortlist. Luton have a terrible defence, but it's more Haaland and Salah that I'm bothered about. So we can see that Salah's opponents, Fulham, have had a worse defence than Spurs this season. Let's pay more attention to the underlying stats though, because the expected goals conceded are better at projecting the future goals conceded than the actual goals conceded themselves, although Spurs do have a slightly better goalkeeper to keep that goals conceded figure down a little bit. Something that needs to be factored in is both of Spurs' first choice centre-backs won't be playing, that's Van der Ven and Romero, and when they've not played in those last 3 matches, Spurs have got 2.6 expected goals conceded per 90 minutes. That's by far the worst out of all the opposition on the shortlist. We need to remember that's based on a small sample size of 3 matches, so we do need to take it with a pinch of salt a little bit, but it's not looking good with those 2 centre-backs out though. But what I would say is that if both of those centre-backs were out for the whole of this season, their expected goals conceded wouldn't be as low as 1.6. In fact, they'd probably be worse than the 1.8 of Fulham's. Before we make a decision, we're going to carry out a quick risk assessment. Haaland featured in the Champions League, but he has had 5 days of recovery, and that's an adequate amount of resting time. Brentford don't play European football, so Mbeumo's had a 4 weeks worth of rest. And whilst this video has been recorded on Thursday, Liverpool's not yet played in the Europa League, and Salah's probably going to feature. Now, if you remember in the points projections, I said with Liverpool not yet playing that fixture, that Salah's expected minutes will probably drop a little bit. That was the case on FPL Review, and it's probably going to be the case on Fantasy Football Fix as well. It'll probably drop it by roughly 0.1 on the points projections. It's not ideal that Liverpool's Europa League fixture finishes around about 10 o'clock on Thursday night, then they've got to play on Sunday at 2. If Salah doesn't play plenty of minutes in that, his expected minutes will probably go up to like 88 or 89. But if he plays anywhere near 90 minutes, they will probably drop to roughly like 85. Before I reveal the player who I think is the best captain, I think it is worth making your own conclusion based on the data analysis because it is extremely tight between the two players. I'd say I'm leaning 51% towards one player and 49% towards the other. There is a slight chance that I could change my mind before the deadline, and if I do, it will be announced on Twitter. In my opinion, if Salah features for anywhere near 90 minutes, I'll almost certainly captain Haaland. And all things considered, especially Davies and Emerson playing centre-backs for Spurs in the last match, I just about think that Haaland pips it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already if you found this video informative so you don't miss any videos like this. And I have got a team selection video coming out shortly. I'm going to be spending 2 free transfers.